Hello, welcome everyone. This is Faces of Stone, the Star Wars Hate Edition. I am Marc-Anthony Macon. I'm your MC for tonight, and we are going to talk about everything you could possibly hate about Star Wars, but especially the most hated Star Wars characters and installments of the Star Wars saga. With me today is the Queen of Other Dimensional France, Noah Diamond. Noah, say hello.
Boy, yeah, you haven't called me that in years, Marc-Anthony.
I was just calling back to the old days.
Happy to be here as always.
And we also have a renegade spy robot, Amanda Sisk, who is running for president, I hear.
Yes. In perpetuity, forever, constantly.
Excellent. You've got my vote.
For president. But galactic, empire at some point.
So you have high aspirations.
I'm not saying anything for sure, but we'll see.
Okay. So tonight we wanted to talk about the things about Star Wars that you hate, or more specifically, the characters that are the most hated. And I think, all of us kind of looked into some of this on our own as we were preparing for this. And I don't know what you guys found, but I think something that I found is that hate seems to be central to Star Wars. There is... it's a critical part of what Star Wars is if you don't actively hate something involved in it, you're not doing it right. You're not addressing your dark side. It's
really very true. And Chris Taylor, in his book, How Star Wars Conquered the Universe, says this very thing, that an inherent part of being a Star Wars fan is viscerally hating Star Wars in at least some respect. And I mean, one thing it speaks to is the gigantic size of what we call Star Wars. Even if you only talk about the movies, it's still so many hours of stuff. And then if you add all the ancillary stuff, there's enough in it that there's something for everyone to hate, no matter how much you generally love it.
Definitely.
And some people just are contrarians and say they hate Star Wars because they think everybody else loves it. Which
there's that too, yeah.
But, if you don't have a really strong opinion about something, you're not really a fan. It's like when you walk into a room and one person gives their opinion on something, then every other person has to give their opinion on it.
I mean, I think I have met a Star Wars apathist now and then.
I don't think they've ever seen Star Wars.
No, but I think there are some people that have never seen Star Wars and they don't really care to, but they're not upset about it. They're not like, shut up about Star Wars.
In a way, that is sort of outrageous. Like, to be indifferent to Star Wars,
that's unacceptable.
To utterly despise it, or to think it's practical.
We want a polarity here, not
in
betweeners about Star.
But to have an attitude toward Star Wars that just says like, oh yeah, it's an okay movie. That seems. How could you possibly think that? You must love it or hate it, right?
I think now I want to aim to have that be my Star Wars opinion.
Star Wars is an okay movie.
Yeah, it's fine.
Star Wars is pretty good.
It's not that bad. I have a model of the Queen's starship above my TV, but
it's like if we were talking about one film, then we could assess its goodness or badness according to our personal tastes. But it's so much more than that. That you can't even really arrive at what is Star Wars. You have to define it before we can even address whether it's...
Yeah, and it's certainly not just those movies or any of the ancillary material, and it's arguably more, the people that are obsessed with it and, where they're putting their energies, which is, I think a lot of Star Wars lives outside of Star Wars. The fact that the prequels create so many memes is a big part of Star Wars, and there's a lot of hate involved in that. I mean, there's a lot of material to chew on in the prequels in terms of hating, so... So let's get into some of the characters that we personally hate before we go on to some of the ones that are, kind of universally hated. So if we have like our pet peeve characters that we just can't stand. Noah, do you have a...
I've been thinking about this a lot in preparation for this discussion, and I've got to say I don't know that there are any Star Wars characters that I hate in that sense.
Sorry, this is my new bingo bell.
Oh, we got a bingo. We got. Okay.
I've really been trying. I mean, there are certainly characters who I think are ineffective, and there are characters who I think are either badly cast or badly designed or something like that, or I don't think their role in the story is meaningful. But I wouldn't use the word hate. There's also, I don't think this is the kind of hate we're talking about either, but there are certainly Star Wars villains who I've hated in a hiss the villain kind of way, especially on early viewings, you know.
Mhm.
I mean, when I first saw Return of the Jedi as a child, I hated the Emperor, you know, Palpatine, and I've just hated that guy. But I hated him because he was such an effective and to a kid such a scary villain. And I got that feeling about him again when I saw Episode 3, in which he is similarly terrifying. But we're not talking about that kind of hate, are we?
I guess not. No. I mean, we might as well, though, because I think that's part of what's fun is these, overwrought villains just kind of, that melodramatic way of just boo hiss. It's fun with Star Wars, and those Star Wars villains are really created in that way. I mean, Count Dooku is very much a melodrama villain in that sense. And I think it's fun to hate in that sense. But I mean, I think that really at the meat of what it is today is, the characters that the masses have just really not liked.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of opinions about other people's hatred of those characters. But personally, I don't know. Personally, there aren't Star Wars characters who just make me cringe with dislike when I see them. But another footnote to that is that my Star Wars experience is pretty much the films. I've only slightly put my toe in the water of all the expanded universe stuff, and I notice that a lot of the most hated characters are from the extra material.
Yes, I mean, that's, from people that are passionate enough about Star Wars to explore all of that, they're going to have strong opinions about those things. I guess it makes sense. But Amanda, what about you? Do you have a character or two that you just personally?
As Noah said, I haven't delved that far into anything beyond the films, the major films. I would say I hate that cow thing that Luke gets milk from, the blue milk.
In The Last Jedi?
It's green milk, isn't it? I think
whatever it is. I hate that thing. I don't think it needed.
I thought it was purple.
It was totally unnecessary, and it was disgusting.
Actually, here's a fun fact: is the milk was a different color in every third theater that it was in. Joke they were playing.
Yes. If you over, it's a different color. So I don't like that character. I think it was just pointlessly gross. I think it was a gross out character. Fine, I'm not a 10-year-old boy, but gross out character. Lazy. I think it was lazy character. I didn't like Dooku. I don't like Count Dooku. I think he is ridiculous. And I don't know why he suddenly appears and then disappears. It's just, there's no reason for him either. He might as well be the milk guy, Well,
I mean, I'm glad he wasn't. Honestly.
You didn't want to see Mark Hamill nursing on Christopher Lee.
Milked by Mark Hamill.
Switch them both, and it's the same thing. Like, why? And then, okay, so we did start watching the Clone Wars, I believe, the little cartoon.
Mm-hmm. The little cartoon.
And there's that humanoid woman child.
Ahsoka Tano, is that who you're talking about?
I guess.
Anakin's apprentice?
Yes.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So I didn't watch very much, but this is the sense I get, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. She's like Pixie Dream Girl, and she's wearing these top pants, and she has to be just human enough or whatever so that she can be like really sexy, and she's got these huge lips, and she just looks like Angelina Jolie, and it pissed me off. Because she's like also this little girl, right?
Yeah, that's not an unfair criticism. But
okay.
to be fair to the creators of the show, she generally wasn't portrayed in a sexual way at all. Like it was never really touched upon. But
in Fanland?
I have no idea, and I'd prefer to keep it that way.
You haven't Googled it?
I really, from my time working at a specific children's television outlet, censoring things, I had to see my share of fan porn that was very uncomfortable, and I'd prefer not to add to that cachet.
Well, if
where do you go for comfortable fan porn?
Right, yeah. I mean, that's a specific search.
So I guess and then I'm sure we'll have a discussion about this later. The way the character of Anakin turned out to be. You know, not necessarily Anakin, but the fact that who Anakin ultimately turned out to be with the story that we got.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. So,
what about you, sir?
I hate Luke.
Wow.
Really, to be honest, like I hate A New Hope Luke and Empire Strikes Back Luke. I can tolerate him by Return of the Jedi, and I love him in The Last Jedi, but I did not like young Luke at all.
You were cheering for him, though. You didn't want him to.
No, I really kind of just wanted him to shut up. I wanted somebody else to be.
Even in your early childhood viewings of the movie?
Well, yes, but I mean, it persists to this day that I still find Luke kind of irritating a lot of the time.
Uh-huh.
So I guess you really enjoyed the time that Han was on screen.
Of course, yes. Yeah, I mean, but you have to understand that, like, as a gay teenager, I had to sign a contract at that time that I had a crush on Harrison Ford. It wasn't my choice. It was, we were just, you were issued this set of rules.
And with your microwave, your gay microwave.
So let's go through some of the characters that a lot of people hate and give our takes.
I'm sorry, I have one more.
Oh, yeah.
I easily hate. This is, I wouldn't say hate, and I would need more time with this, but I think I hate young Han in Solo.
In the Solo movie?
Yes. I really didn't like him, and I didn't like the movie. And because of him. So anyway, we can talk about that.
Well, I mean, we'll get to that movie more in depth when we get to that movie, but I didn't mind him in that. I can see why someone would hate him, though. But I mean, Linda Hunt as a centipede that has a bunch of orphans under her control is enough to make me like anything.
Yeah, problem again. But anyway.
Okay, so do we want to start with some of the really big ones that everybody hates, or do we want to start more obscure?
Let's start more obscure. Let's save the crowd pleasers for the end.
Let's go ahead with Zero the Hutt.
Okay.
We did a little talking about this. So for anyone out there that doesn't know, Zero the Hutt is a pink and purple. He's Jabba's cousin or something, uncle perhaps, something like that. He's related to Jabba. He's in the same crime syndicate as Jabba. He's pink and purple, has feathers, and talks like Truman Capote. And I understand why anyone would instantly loathe this character. They have every right to. But I love him. I love him with all my heart, Zero.
Because he is in the Clone Wars cartoon, which I have almost never seen, by the way, for anyone out there who might be wondering. Here we go. Not very good image. So
gives you enough info, though.
I wasn't aware of this character, but Marc-Anthony gave Amanda and me a list of.
Okay, wait. I'm sorry. Can you wait for 1 second? I'm not sure if you can actually hear this, but if you can, it's worth it.
Let's.
Zero. Oh, you must be Anakin Skywalker. Have you met my Padawan?
That's how the guy talks.
I love him so much. The best thing ever. So I don't know how accurate this is, but apparently when they were working on that Clone Wars movie where he first appeared, Lucas came to their studio and he was just kind of dropping by just to be like, yeah, I'm here. I'm George Lucas and you can do stuff with my stuff. And he was just kind of giving little notes here and there on ideas he had. And one of them was that this Hutt is boring. So just make him talk like Truman Capote. And that's what they did.
And boy, howdy, he does.
He certainly does.
He sure does.
I mean, I really can't. I don't even know what he said any of the times we watched any of it. I have no idea anything he said. I'm just realizing because I'm just sitting there listening to the way he said it.
We looked at some, Zero the Hutt clips on YouTube to prepare based on your very useful guide, Marc-Anthony. Yeah, I think right away, just a Hutt speaking English, or Galactic Basic, as the fans would call it, is already a little strange, because we're used to Hutts having subtitles and speaking Huttese. So I think even Jabba the Hutt, imagine the Jabba we all know, and imagine him saying, "I have no intention of giving up my favorite decoration." It just it becomes instantly like 10 times dumber. And then the fact that Zero the Hutt speaks, yes, like Truman Capote, but also just in this, it's just a courtly Southern character who should be standing on a porch somewhere drinking a mint julep. And
except for this feather,
as well, Tennessee Williams,
this feather thing that he's got going on, which is totally incongruous with this like seersucker voice.
And when I read last night or the night before, I read that story about George Lucas wandering into the writer's room and saying, "Oh, why don't you make a Truman Capote Hutt?" And I just thought, oh, these poor bastards who had to just be this guy's little playthings. You're working in this room buried deep within the compound at Skywalker Ranch. You're probably pretty well paid, but you don't get out much. And every now and then, George Lucas just kind of waddles by and he says, "Make me a dinosaur Hutt."
A dinosaur Hutt?
Yeah, or anything that's on his mind.
Oh my God, a dinosaur Hutt would be wonderful.
She could get together with the Truman Capote Hutt. That would be wonderful. She could interview him.
It would be quite an interview.
So, I don't know. I love things like Zero because the fact that people get such a reaction out of him and just really cannot stand even looking at him. To me, that's one of the beautiful things about Star Wars is that sometimes people are just like so mad at it. It's the closest some of them get to sports. Like, when a big sports thing happens and people jump up and scream, I realize I've never gotten that excited about anything.
I know that.
Star Wars does that for people that don't get that excited about sports. Because of Zero the Hutt.
I would like to see Zero the Hutt have a... Go ahead.
Marc-Anthony, did you just say when a big sports things happen? When a big okay.
When a sports thing happens. Is there like a specific term for a sports thing?
It's all right. I've been trying for years.
Okay.
Yeah, no, a big sports thing
I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to learn.
And all of the sports admirers in the sports venue.
But second, why did people hate him so much? Like, didn't people find him funny? Why was he so hated?
Well, because I think that a lot of Star Wars fans they don't want really any humor in Star Wars. I wouldn't say any humor at all, but they want a very specific nostalgic humor. And Zero steps outside of it. They basically don't want silly humor. And Zero is silly.
I read that some took him as an offensive caricature of a gay man.
Yeah, oh yeah. I mean, he certainly is that, but
a specific gay man. I mean,
yeah, not we know.
I know a lot of gay people. None of them talk like Truman Capote.
They can do their makeup better than Zero.
People talk like that who are not gay because I come from Arkansas and Tennessee, so
yes.
It's a requirement for every 10th guy to talk like that if you're over 60 or so.
But I mean, there is also beyond Truman Capote. It's true. Like in a live action version, Charles Durning could play Zero the Hutt, don't you think? Actually, I would love to see a scene between Zero the Hutt and Pizza the Hutt from Spaceballs.
Or else Pizza's gonna call out for you.
Yeah.
I heard that Mel Brooks was thinking of, because of new Star Wars things coming out, making a sequel to Spaceballs.
Yeah, or a prequel even.
Right, yeah. And I do hope if he does it, he calls, because at one point he said he had a title for it. This was right after Spaceballs came out. But I'm hoping he does call it Spaceballs 3, The Search for Spaceballs 2, The Search for More Money.
Yeah.
I'd like that.
So Zero was in the Clone Wars, but was he in any comic books or anything like that as well?
He probably was in some comic books and things. It seems like there's not a lot of Zero material because I tried, of course, to look for a Zero the Hutt action figure because I've got to have that, but it doesn't exist.
We saw a clip. He's killed by who kills him?
Well, I think if I remember correctly, he's double-crossed by s02.
Right, that's exactly
Yeah.
right. They had
Yeah.
they were lovers at some
Sai
point.
is a little minx, by the way. We learn in the Clone Wars that she's a conniving and crafty.
Well, she wouldn't be
Underworld
a hero, were she not?
What?
She wouldn't be, I mean, like if you're hanging out, if you're dating a gangster, you want something. You're not to be trusted.
Right. You've got plans within plans.
Can you explain in detail how sexual congress works between s02 and Zero the Hutt?
I cannot, but I can tell you that Hutts are hermaphroditic.
Well, I have found I always accepted that because you've told me that before, but in reading about Zero the Hutt, I think last night, I discovered that the hermaphroditude of Hutts may no longer be considered.
Oh, is that not canon anymore?
I think that may not be canon.
Oh my! Oh wow!
At least
behind on my scriptures.
At least according to the
that would make sense, because I mean we have seen some moderately gender presenting Hutts.
Yes.
Since
I love
the
a moderately gender
the Hutt.
Yeah.
Who seem to have bodacious tatas.
Yeah, boobs. They have boobs.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's true.
And they're not.
I wouldn't expect a slug to have mammary glands, but whatever.
Well, you wouldn't expect that cow thing to give milk either.
Oh, I would. I would expect at least something to be expunged from those teats.
Okay, yes, correct. Yes, okay, yes.
I might not guess blue, purple, green milk. All right, so let's not quite so obscure, but let's go on kind of I think a light one. Like a lot of the lists that I found of people giving their personal most hated characters, their 10th one in the top 10 list would start with Newt Gunray.
Uh-huh.
So what are your thoughts on him?
For me, the Neimoidians fall into the category of characters who, I can't say I hate them, but I find them ineffective characters. I really don't like them. And I think one of the big problems with episode 1 is that we spend so much time with Newt Gunray and who's the other major Neimoidian? I can't think of his name, but yeah, they're as creatures and as designs, they're not that interesting. Their voices are sort of, I think it sounds kind of like old Dracula movie, Transylvanian, but it's been also accused of being a kind of yellow face sound. I don't know. I just find those characters stilted and uninteresting, and they take up way too much air in especially the first episode. And the thing I do like about Newt Gunray, though, is that it's so transparently at least a slight parody of Newt Gingrich, and
Ronald Reagan.
And Ronald Reagan, yeah, I suppose so.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of barely coded political messages in all the Star Wars movies, particularly the prequels and the original trilogy. And I always like it when that happens, because it's another piece of evidence that all the mania about The Last Jedi suddenly going political in some way is really, it's just more a case of you didn't notice that this has always been.
Attention until now.
Yeah. So I love that. Newt Gunray is one of the more on-the-nose references to actual American politics in the whole Star Wars series. But I still wish that character was just more interesting to watch.
Mm. I think while I agree with you that he is a completely uninteresting character, and of course, something that you can say of a lot of characters in Star Wars, borderline racially offensive and more or less positively racially offensive. But I do kind of like the fact that since he's such a bumbling enemy that is clearly ineffectual, it kind of does distract from the Phantom Menace. It works in terms of that you don't really initially know that there's really such a threat until Palpatine and his Darth Maul show up. So it kind of works in that way. And I also, just as a fan of B movies, I love we totally just screwed the pooch on this design. I love you, Amanda says. Okay, so what about Fode and Bede. Do you know who these guys are?
Yeah, the podcast announcers.
Right. One of whom was Greg Proops.
Yeah.
Yep.
And who played the other one?
I could have
He
told
was
you.
a comedian that I had not heard of.
A comedian.
We looked at
so Greg Proops and a comedian that we've not heard of that can speak Huttese, I guess.
Now, when I was asking, Noah and I were talking about this, and I was asking, why would people hate these guys so much? So much that they would make lists, of hated characters. Because they seem whatever to me. I just don't give a shit.
Yes, I agree.
But then Noah said maybe it's because they take up so much fucking screen time.
They do take up a fair amount of screen time. In
a movie where you're trying to get to something good happening, and something good never seems to happen, and then you have this pod race that goes on forever, and even though it goes on forever, in between, there are these long interstitials of these two guys doing the same thing of the same joke over and over again.
Scott Capurro is the name of the comedian who plays Bede, the one who speaks Huttese. Scott Capurro.
Okay.
Yeah, I find it a little bit. I want to hasten to add that I really like Greg Proops. I think he's a very funny and good comedian.
Wonderful guy, Greg Proops.
He really is. He was brilliant on Whose Line Is It Anyway? But there's something about his delivery that is contemporary and American in a way that mostly you don't find in Star Wars. It's a very colloquial, contemporary, American-sounding cadence that he has, and I think that's part of why the humor of it feels a little too silly. Star Wars characters, even when they have American accents, there's a kind of stiltedness and a slightly fairy tale affect to it that sells a lot of what they have to say. And Greg Proops, he sounds very contemporary.
He does, no. And I also think that, this feeds into, a lot of Star Wars fans just hate the silly, and that was completely silly and not very effective silly at that, which is unusual for Greg Proops. But I think what I do like about these characters is that this is basically NASCAR, and so it's fitting that they're kind of glaringly American in that sense. Because this is, kind of a NASCAR sort of nod. And that's something that's very specifically American. There are other car races around the world, but they're not quite NASCAR-like.
No. I just can't. This is one of those things where I do not understand why people would have any passionate feelings at all.
Yeah, I agree.
So many. This is just pick your battles, people. We're talking about that movie. You're going to pick this thing in that whole movie. That's your problem?
You need to learn to prioritize your hatred.
Exactly. We got a triage here because it's serious.
All right, Boss Nass is another majorly hated character.
I know. I love Boss Nass. I came across his name in a listicle of this nature, and I was disgusted with Star Wars.
It's Brian Blessed, people.
It's Brian Blessed, and I love him. I think, in episode 1 specifically, you have characters like Newt Gunray, where it's just like a sock puppet would have been just as effective. But then, whatever you may think of the story and the dialogue, the characterizations of some of the creatures, including I think Watto and Boss Nass, it's brilliant. They're great cartoons.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And Boss Nass is just a lot of fun.
Yeah, he's funny. I also like
that, if you take 2 seconds to think about it. Considering that most Gungans have these big eye stalks and long ears, if we assume his ears are tied behind his head, he's still a very obese Gungan.
Yes.
To have that much fat up to his stalks being covered, which I think.
Yeah, it seems like he is slightly physiologically different from the other Gungans. Maybe that's why he's in charge. He's a special being in some way. Yeah. But I think if you can't see your way through to admiring the characterization and the vocal performance by Brian Blessed, then maybe we are not being friends.
I love the frogman accent. Where did that come from, Brian? Thanks. Thanks, Brian.
Should have done it like Caesar, then Augustus, and I would have enjoyed it more.
I can't make that. I was trying, but I can't make that happen.
For somebody to make that happen.
I was trying.
So
no, don't even. Maybe another time. I'll work on my Brian.
Work on it, yeah.
But this one, I don't think we need to talk about that much, but I just want to mention it because he was on a couple of lists, and it's also another obscure thing. I'm going to do my best to pronounce this name. It's
You mean Joe Yowza?
I mean Joe Yowza.
Yes, Joe Yowza. He made so many.
There are a lot of people that, I mean, especially I think at the time when the special editions first came out, really wanted to murder Joe Yowza.
I think it speaks to your point about silly.
Yeah.
It speaks to a point about it being so contemporary. And it seemed almost superimposed on, the film. And also, it's one of those little moments, like a 2-second moment that's just so irritating to everybody, like nails on a chalkboard when he goes, "Wah!" I mean, you just hate it. You hate him. You hate it. There's really nothing redeeming about it.
And for the folks at home, we're talking about this guy in the special edition of Return of the Jedi. He's in the Max Rebo band in Jabba's palace, and he has a big guttural Louis Armstrong kind of note, and the camera zooms in on him. It's so, part of the reason it's so out of place is because it goes right in his mouth, the camera, and he has a Muppet mouth, specifically those tonsils like a Muppet.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if someone's done an edit where we just have, Dr. Teeth doing that instead.
I mean, yeah, it could be. He's a Muppet. He's a Fraggle. He's not.
But again, I find this, like, while I kind of roll my eyes at that sort of thing, I just find it strange that people can be very passionately angry about something like that.
I don't like it at all. And now that I know people don't like him, I think it'll increase my hate.
It'll increase your hate in general, or your hate
of Joe Yowza?
Of Joe Yowza?
Yeah, now that I know that he's
following the Joe Yowza hating crowd.
Now that I realize I'm right.
Mm-hmm.
I think the extra stuff in that musical number it's so out of place that it takes me out of Return of the Jedi, and for that reason I don't like it. However, if it had been released separately as a standalone music video, I think I would be fine with it, and I really do like the Max Rebo band, and I'd like to see more of them. And my pitch for a Star Wars standalone film is a rockumentary about the Max Rebo band.
Yeah, I love that idea with my whole heart, and I hope you make it happen, because that's what the Star Wars universe really does need, is an expose.
This is Spinal Tap,
This is Spinal Tap, but this is the reboot. By the way, I'm sure you may have heard this, but as I was, researching this stuff, I came across my favorite, inadvertently hilarious Star Wars term from the very early days, jizz whaler. This is a term for, a certain kind of musician in the Star Wars universe. And I've heard it conflictingly said that Max Rebo is a jizz whaler, and also that Figrin Dan and the modal nodes are jizz whalers. They're the ones from the cantina.
Oh, well.
But they seem to have very different styles. I doubt both of those could be jizz whaling, you guys.
I don't know. Maybe it's more like, they're a jam band. Not all jam bands are alike.
Well, maybe.
There's
well, one of those
jam
guys
bands that are exactly alike, but there are also other jam bands that aren't Widespread Panic and Dave Matthews Band and Fish.
But if Dave Matthews had a butt for a mouth,
anyone's asking us questions, by the way.
You think if Dave Matthews had a butt for a mouth, it would, first of all, would there be any difference in the vocals? And second of all, would it be a jizz whaler?
Jizz whaler. Mm-hmm.
She'll be fine. Don't worry.
Okay, so why don't we segue into, I think, what can be a really great thing here is that you guys just watched the holiday special.
That's true.
And since a few of the hated characters are from that holiday special, let's start with those characters. And then we can talk about the special itself a little bit.
Well, it'll be a few minutes, I think, before we get Amanda back.
Okay. Take whatever time you need, Amanda.
you know,
we're going to talk about Lumpy in the interim.
The holiday special, yeah, I mean, though I think among the most tedious parts of the very tedious Star Wars holiday special are the scenes with Chewbacca's Wookiee family. And on your list, Marc-Anthony, you included Chewbacca's father, Itchy, as well as his son, Lumpy.
Yes.
As among hated characters, and it's not hard to see why they'd be thought of that way. They're very annoying, and unlike annoying characters in the films, it's not that there's this interesting movie all around them. They are the whole thing, you know.
It opened with like 20 solid minutes entirely in Wookiee with no subtitles or indication of what's happening. It is just 20 minutes of...
And imagine in 1978, the people who tuned in for this expecting it to be a family Christmas special, which is what it was supposed to be and how it was promoted. It actually reminds me very much of the Beatles' Magical Mystery Tour, which also was sold as a family holiday special and everyone tuned in. And in that case, they got this weird, druggy, psychedelic thing from the Beatles, who they had been thinking of as the nice guys in suits who sang "I Want to Hold Your Hand." This is kind of like that. Star Wars was a phenomenon, and it was for kids, and everyone loved it. So there's a Star Wars holiday special. Let's see what it is. And it's just guys in suits going... and
it's B. Arthur singing.
Yeah,
B. Arthur. We have a lot more time dedicated to this thing, but I gotta tell you, I you know me, I hate everything. I hate every fucking thing. And I didn't mind the Christmas special. I didn't mind it. I thought it was okay. Like, it was fine.
There is something unique and beautiful about it. I mean, it's so distracted. Like, it just really doesn't know in any way what it should focus on. It's based. I mean, it's like a variety show with a slight, you know, it's like if David Lynch phoned in a variety show, really, you know, like, I won't do Return of the Jedi, but I'll do this real quick.
But it's also like the scariest parts of like the Electric Company, you know, and like that kind of shit, like kid stuff, but that got a little creepy.
It got like, when Itchy was watching the dancing girls and then had the
acrobats on the table, and oh my god,
Diane Carroll.
We're not going to talk about this. We have a whole episode dedicated.
Yeah, we should just say for the folks at home, on September 15th, we have a theme episode entitled Happy Life Day, the Star Wars Holiday Special, and other special things. And we will go into the holiday special, and I guess we should restrict our conversation.
We should save some stuff for that. But in the interim, if you're watching at home, try to watch that so that you can have some context for what we're talking about, because it is a piece of work.
And chat
with us. Write dissertations on this thing.
And the emphasis is on try. Try to watch the holiday special. You may not be able to. Many have failed.
Seriously, let us know what you thought. Let us know what you want to talk about.
Speaking of which, do we have the chat up in case anyone's asking us questions?
Yes,
have you seen anything?
There was a comment, but it's been retracted, and I was unable to read it prior to its retraction. So keep them coming, folks. Keep them coming. We'll respond in the order they are received.
Okay, so like there's a few other just characters that I would like to just kind of rattle off here before we get to some of the more contentious ones. But I think we've got Watto and actually let's talk about Kylo a bit, but let's talk about Watto really quick first. A lot of people hate the Watto.
I like Watto. Again, he, along with Boss Nass, is one of my favorite creatures from the prequels. And yeah, I think Watto's great. He's funny. He's a vividly drawn character. In a movie where many characters have no personality, he really does. I like him. I guess the main criticism is that he's another one of the characters in the prequels who is often seen as being an ethnic caricature. It's an interesting one for me because he's specifically often accused of being an anti-Semitic caricature. And as a Jewish person, the fact that I'm not offended by Watto makes me feel maybe more dismissive than I should be of that criticism as it applies to other characters, you know. I mean, if I don't find Watto offensive, so I don't know. That remains a complex issue, and I think that these characters, because the intention is so clearly not to caricature people, it's complicated. But if that is the effect, then who can argue with those who, you know, are hurt by them? Personally, I've got no complaints about Watto, and I think he's a really good character.
And he's certainly not beautifully designed. Like, it's a really great... I mean, I think that a lot of emphasis was put prior to the release of The Phantom Menace on the fact that Jar Jar Binks was going to be the first, you know, fully animated character that was realized and had a big part in the story. But Watto was, I think, a much more complicated digital puppet as far as I'm concerned. And really well done. And, you know, Danny DeVito has never looked better. What about, let's get into a little weirder territory. Admiral Holdo. Played by Laura Dern.
Yeah.
And she has gotten a lot of hate. A lot of especially the fanboys really do not like Holdo.
I was talking about this last night with Noah and talking about how, you know, she is the one who at the end of the day is, you know, saves things and she sacrifices and she gets to slap down Poe and say, no,
yeah.
you didn't do the right thing. I did. And how that must just be infuriating to a crowd base that also does not like Rose and has a problem with Rey and has a problem with Finn, and this must just be getting worse and worse. And then you look at Rogue One, and geez Louises, and like it's just yes. And these people are saying my universe is being taken over. It's kind of like being, you know, saying I want America to go back to the good old days.
Yeah.
So I didn't like her as a character very much. I didn't think she had enough as a character to be liked or disliked. I think she was just kind of, I don't know, she didn't have enough build or growth, but I don't hate her. And I think anyone who does hate her violently, I gotta think it has something to do with gender.
I certainly don't hate Holdo. The story, The Last Jedi as a narrative, gives you reasons to feel impatient with her. It takes a while in the movie before you know if you should trust her or not. But this is all written in. I mean, that's the way it's supposed to be. I think there is a tendency in the Star Wars films, I think it applies to all three trilogies, of where you have a character, it's not a big role, but it's an important part in the story. And the character isn't written with a lot of specific substance, but you cast a great actor in the role and let them bring substance to it. And you're talking about Count Dooku. I mean, Christopher Lee did that, you know. Christopher Lee, his face, his voice, his presence, anything he does has gravitas and is profound. And he also seems to be a walking reference to all of the classic films that he's been in.
Right, so, especially the Hammer horror type stuff. Like.
Yeah, right. So, you know, so Holdo being Laura Dern and having this, you know, presence that she just has no matter what she does, elevates the character a little bit to the point where at the end, when Holdo makes her selfless sacrifice, there is a moment between Holdo and Leia that's really quite beautiful. And you suddenly understand that these two women have been lifelong, you know, allies. They've been through a lot together. We don't know all about that because it wasn't in this movie. And part of the reason I think that is a beautiful and moving moment is because, you know, Laura Dern and Carrie Fisher are capable of communicating so much
yes.
without talking.
Yeah, no, I mean, Holdo is one of my favorite characters, really, and for no small amount of because of Laura Dern playing her. And I think that, you know, as you say, what she brings to whatever she's doing, I mean, in this situation where we don't really know how we feel about her, considering Laura Dern's roles in the past, you know, you're instantly thinking she could be a crazy sociopath. She could be a genius. She could be an angel of some sort. She could be any of these things. Like, Laura Dern has a very strange breadth to the kind of characters that she'll play. But I do like that Holdo exists to kind of directly criticize the audience, or at least the audience that hates her. I mean, she is, you know, slapping their flyboy right on his dick, and I love it. It makes me really happy.
That's one of the things that makes The Last Jedi complex and interesting, and a deepening of the story rather than just a continuation of it. And anyone who has a problem with, you know, the idea that female leadership is going to be a factor here.
But they have insisted that has nothing to do with it. So let's take them at their word.
What did they say then? What is the problem?
She should have told Poe what her plan was so that he wouldn't be acting this way. You know because,
what?
Yeah.
Not posed to know. Like, why?
Right. He just disobeyed orders, for one thing. Like, he is just basically had his hand slapped in a big way, and she's supposed to tell him their plan, whatever.
And you're not, but yeah, she doesn't have to tell him.
Yeah.
That's what those rankings are, like general.
But I mean, I think that she's an example of, you know, a lot of the ones we've talked about already have been basically, you know, people don't like being reminded that this is a silly thing. And that's not what the reason they're upset about her at all.
No.
She's not silly. I mean, perhaps her cotton candy hair is slightly silly.
Her little,
but, you know, she's...
Her pretty and pink kind of dress is a little silly.
Right. But it's not like she's, you know, in the silly party from Monty Python. She's not named Tom from Hook Hand Deerhead Jones, you know, like she's...
No.
So while we're talking about Holdo, then let's talk about Rose.
Yeah.
Same kind of thing.
Very similar thing. Although,
I mean, basically the exact same thing.
In terms of the criticism.
Yeah.
But I think Holdo, unlike Holdo, though, I think Rose actually is a complicated and compelling character. I love Rose. I don't have any hatred for her at all. I think her presence in The Last Jedi, again, is one of the things that makes that movie so interesting and different. But you know, it's hard to read any criticism of her as anything but veiled misogyny, racism, and sizeism, because it's so clearly. First of all, she is an avatar for so many fans. I mean, there's a lot more Rose Ticos at the conventions, I would think, you know, than there are Poe Damerons.
Right, and I mean, it seems like you know, these guys that, you know, akin to what we were saying, even with the sillier characters. It's like, if you don't like it, then just ignore it and shut up. But if you're going to create this big ruckus, I feel like that's telling those girls, you're not welcome here. You can't participate in our, you know, goofy little religion about space wizards.
It's also that in the story, she is an outsider. You know, she's in awe of all these heroes of the Resistance. And then she slowly comes to realize that they are, in fact, very flawed, and that they require her wisdom and intervention and expertise, too.
It's beautifully written. I just love her edition.
I do, too. And her relationship with her sister, you know, that's sketched in very quickly, but it works. You know, her background is, you know, instantly what it's about. And I've heard it's a somewhat derided line by the kind of fanboys you're talking about, but her final conclusion in the last sequence about how, you know, it's not by killing what we hate, it's by saving what we love that we will change the galaxy, or, you know, words to that effect. I thought that was fantastic and beautiful. I love that moment, and it's been a long time, I think, since a Star Wars movie has given me, anyway, one moment that sums it all up. I think that's the whole thing.
Yeah, I love her, and I can't wait to see what they do with her in Episode 9.
Now, from what I understand, Marc-Anthony, is that when she was cast, this started happening. She started getting harassed.
I would not be surprised. I haven't heard that, but it wouldn't surprise me.
And
I mean, same thing with John Boyega. He got a lot of flack when he was cast, and I remember, like, this is one of the things, is there may be a term for this. If not, I wish there would be. I'm sure there is. But because it certainly has happened in, like, the dramatic and theater world for a very long time. But in this situation, it was because this breaks their illusion. They feel okay about being racist with their comments. So when the first trailer we saw of Force Awakens showed a black stormtrooper, but they're all clones. He can't, it's not that we have a problem with having a black actor in Star Wars, it's that he can't be a stormtrooper because they're clones.
Right.
Because obviously I know more about this than the people who are making the movie.
Yes.
And maybe you do, but it's a freaking movie,
right.
But the Rose thing was definitely about, if she had been, let's think about if her sister, the actress playing her sister, and her had been switched. Would there have been such an outrage about this beautiful, slim Asian woman instead of kind of a more average sized and looking Asian woman? Would there have been a different reception to that?
I'm sure there would have been. But there probably would have been different receptions from a lot of different factions of people that are just tangentially interested in Star Wars and people that are really into it. But I think that the people that, that basically harassed her online to the point that she got rid of all of her online social accounts, I think those people probably would not have said anything other than, ooh, she's hot.
So do you think it was more, if you could break it down, if it can be broken out like this, do you think people are more upset, or the biggest range of people are more upset because it was a female, because it was Asian, because she was average looking, or?
I think it's a combination of all of those things. But I think that the biggest part about it was probably that she was a woman that was criticizing their heroes.
Interesting.
And by looking the way that she does, they see that as a critique. And I think there's a big faction of the kind of, not just Star Wars community, but geek communities that kind of have, anytime there is, some kind of new representation in the thing that they love, they argue saying they're doing this just to appease people, not because it's the right thing to do or not because it works with the story. They're doing it just to appease politically correct.
I think it must be said, though, that particular response to The Last Jedi and The Force Awakens too, the angry fan bro, let's say fan bro, it's a fan bro works, yeah. That fan bro response, I believe, is a tiny minority opinion that just gets amplified on the web many times over. And
it's hard, yeah.
On Rotten Tomatoes, The Last Jedi is over 90% fresh. It's not. It didn't actually bitterly divide quite as much as people say it did. I think that a very vocal minority of not very nice people said horrible things about it, and that wound up being an interesting clickbait story for other people to write about. Ooh, Last Jedi divides Star Wars fans. I really don't think it's true, but I also want to acknowledge there are people who didn't like The Last Jedi for reasons that have nothing to do with this. And there, you might have disliked The Last Jedi and not been racist or misogynist or clickbait story for other people to write about. Ooh, Last Jedi divides Star Wars fans.
Sorry.
I didn't need a replay of that. I didn't hear what Noah said, so I'm glad that this accident happened. I don't know. I feel like when I look at Star Wars things online now compared to when I did when the prequels were out, and there was really no online when the originals were in their original circulation, but compared to the prequels and Force Awakens times, it really is a divided fan community. There are people that vehemently love the Last Jedi and people that are really anti The Last Jedi. And, there are independents as well, but it seems to be pretty loudly those two camps. And also the people that really love it aren't producing that much content about loving it. They're really just defending it. Whereas the predominance of videos about The Last Jedi on YouTube, for example, that are just fans saying whatever they think about it are negative. And
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to
interrupt you.
I wanted to address Jason McMahon, who's chimed in.
Yes, Jason.
Jason. And Jason.
Oh, hi, Jason McMahon.
Wasn't a fan of Rose's storyline. That whole side thing with Finn, and felt it didn't, I guess, further the story along, was pointless.
Fair enough, and that illustrates what I was saying before. I don't want to make it sound like anyone who didn't like The Last Jedi, it must be because they're racist. Jason seems to have a legitimate story gripe. I don't think I quite agree about that specific point, but there is a legitimate and non-horrendous criticism of The Last Jedi. Good going, Jason. Congratulations on having a very legitimate criticism. No fan bro, you.
But no, I think Rose brings the story forward in ways that are important, and brings the saga forward in ways that are important.
That casino world
scene, which is, a lot of people, do say that they don't like that whole casino scene, and that it doesn't serve any purpose. And I think it to me, it's one of the most important scenes in the whole story. I love that it kind of reminds us that, yes, there's the evil empire and there's the good resistance, and then there's the people getting rich off of their war. Let's maybe talk about them a little bit.
I agree with that, but
it's not my favorite. I found myself getting a little bored, and I also found myself getting a little Hunger Gamey.
Amanda Sisk, there was an opera singer made out of boobs.
and aren't they all?
Tuesday night. I mean, like, this doesn't, I see that. I live in New York City.
I think that substantively, I agree with what you're saying, Marc-Anthony, about the significance of that chapter of the story. It does have something interesting to say about the galaxy we're in, and I love the way it morally complicates things. However, I think in terms of the visuals, the design of that sequence, and what that world looks and feels like, and the characters and creatures there, that all feels slightly subpar to me for Star Wars. And I think maybe there was a deliberate effort not to make it too appealing, and like if it was a ragtag Mos Eisley Cantina kind of place, then we might not appreciate the moral ambiguity as much. But from that point of view, I found it a little lacking.
Okay, fair enough. And same to Jason. You don't have to love that.
I do think that there's some beautiful irony in this. The reaction to the recent Star Wars movies that criticizes them for being too politically correct or some such nonsense. Because, as we talked about with Newt Gunray, this has been right from the beginning. The prequels are full of specific references to stuff that was going on during the Bush administration and the Iraq War.
Were coming out. It was direct criticism, basically.
Direct criticism. If you're not with me, you're against me. Anakin actually says that, and that's almost a word-for-word quote from George W. Bush. And the original trilogy, including the 1977 original film, was a specific reaction, at least in part, to Watergate and Vietnam.
Yeah.
And aren't the rebels not the American side in the Vietnam War? And isn't there some beautiful justice in Kelly Marie Tran, a very, very talented and wonderful Vietnamese actress, getting this role in the sequel trilogy? I mean, that actually is what this entire story is about. And if you don't see that, I just wonder if you're an amateur misser of points or if you're doing it professionally.
I miss a lot of points that I used to have. I wonder if I could get them on eBay.
The point is gone. It's gone. You're just one step closer to pointlessness.
So, okay, I think some other, bigger hated characters would be Kylo and Anakin. I think they're kind of hated in similar but not entirely similar ways.
No idea that Kylo was hated. I had no idea. Hated.
I
love that guy.
I was surprised as I was looking things up like this. I was surprised by the amount of. I wasn't surprised there was some Kylo hate, but there was more Kylo hate than I would have expected. But still, nowhere near as much as there is Anakin hate, which is as it should be.
Kylo Ren is awesome. He's awesome. I mean, that's as specific as I can get because it's so grand, the scale of his awesomeness.
I'm a big Kylo fan too. I mean, I love that the villain is, you know, a petulant fanboy wannabe.
Luke on the other side.
Yeah.
I have complicated feelings about Kylo Ren, and I seriously considered that maybe he was my answer to are there any Star Wars characters who I hate? But I decided he wasn't. First of all, because it's not about the performance. Adam Driver does a fine job with that character. I think in The Force Awakens, I had the hatred for him that I was supposed to. The same thing I was saying earlier about Palpatine, you know. I mean, he kills Han Solo. He's such a brat. But as you say, that's kind of what's novel about it. Like, yeah, a petulant teenage villain, as opposed to all the dark fathers we're used to seeing. But yeah, there's something about Kylo Ren that is, he's a more... I was thinking that in a way, he's like a character from the prequels, inserted into the new trilogy, a guy who takes everything very, very seriously, who, you know, and he's so over the top and he's so unself-aware, but these are all the things that make him an interesting villain. Yeah, I remember when he broke, when he
does seem inserted from the prequels, and I mean, I also love how, like, over the top his symbolism is. Like, yes, all right, he's a white nationalist. I mean, he's got a literal burning cross in his hand. We get it.
Yeah, that's true. He is also in The Last Jedi when he destroys his mask. I remember thinking, oh God, put it back together. And in The Force Awakens when he takes off the mask for the first time, and he has such luxurious.
His hair is very lush. What kind of conditioner does he use?
I swear to God, it's Pantene. He's Kelly Brock all over again. Don't hate him because he's beautiful. That was amazing when he took that off the first time. But now there's all this like weird, like, you know, brother sister sexual tension thing going on.
Well, that's not new either.
Nothing new. Yeah.
I know. But I love that. I love him. I love him. I love that he's so confused. He's so small. Yes, petulant. He takes himself so seriously. He's all of us. He's all of us at a certain point in our lives, and with better hair.
Yeah.
Because none of us had that good of hair when we were acting that way. But God, I love him. And when he's like grandfather, I mean, it's just the best. It's just, he's amazing. He's amazing.
I'm with you.
Snoke. So, you know, what's your problem?
Oh, so I'll throw this out there. Snoke might be one of my hated characters.
I was about to ask about that.
I kind of forgot about Snoke, maybe intentionally. I really have never liked Snoke at all.
It's as if he's a little lame. It's just we're gonna need an arch villain here.
Yeah. Yeah, he wasn't very interesting, and I mean, I like, you know, since The Last Jedi just kind of literally cut him out and in half that's how I can appreciate him, is knowing that he was kind of set up and then instantly shot down. I enjoyed that.
Don't you feel like we're gonna have to go back to him a little bit?
We might, and I mean, when we get closer to Rise of Skywalker, I'll, if you like, fill you in on the absurd fan theories that they're going to be very disappointed don't come true.
Okay, well, good, because we have a whole episode coming up, everyone, about villains. And
right.
So you can step up to the plate on that one.
Anyone who's wondering, our complete schedule is at facesofstone.space. But I can tell you, because I'm looking at it right now, that the villains episode, Give In to the Dark Side, will be broadcast here on October 27th.
Hosted by yours truly, the resident villain lover. Typical. Predictable.
Okay, so let's move on to Anakin.
Oh, it should have been something so great. It should have been, I mean, when we found out this was happening, we were just waiting for it. We're like, okay, we've been waiting for this for so long. Why did this happen to this person? What did Obi-Wan mean he was betrayed and killed? Like, how do we put this all together from times past, you know? And you get nothing. You get nothing.
A towhead brat and a boy band reject that throws weird temper tantrums.
And it's like, because somebody in your family died. This is what turned you into this, because a lot of us have this happen. In fact, everybody has this happen, and there's really only one of you, and you just deal with it. You read Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, you move on, and
just send that boy the right book.
I'm an empire. You don't kill people. That's all I'm saying. But I don't know. Like, there's no why. Why see who he is? My battery doesn't run out. I've got to get a charger.
Yeah, I agree with what Amanda's saying. I don't know that it would have been possible to create a character who would have lived up to what we all needed Anakin to be by the time we got to the prequels. But yeah, it should have been this Shakespearean role, the greatest fantasy character imaginable. And specifically in the original trilogy, we were told so often about, oh my God, how does she, what? I don't know how she did that.
Force teleportation.
Yeah, but and the Anakin we meet in the prequels is at best just kind of we get little glimpses of this awesome character we were promised, but I don't know. I think
part of the issue with Anakin is that no matter what, even if it had been done, let's say if the three of us absolutely loved the way that it was executed, it was done in a way that we all agreed was great. There would be thousands of people that hated the way that it was done. I mean, everyone imagined what they thought Vader was like prior to being Vader, and it's hard to live up to that in any case. But I love the fact that what we got is what absolutely no one wanted. It's like all you could have pleased a couple of niche things, and like all you did was like the three like New Kids on the Block fans that got dragged to that movie that never had seen any Star Wars things. We're like, he's cute. That's all.
I know. It's too bad. I think in our next episode next week, when we talk about episode 3, we will probably touch on the fact that Anakin gets better as he gets worse.
Yes.
And yes. Partly it's the performance, partly it's the writing, but he does become more convincing and therefore more compelling the closer he gets to the dark side. But
and in fairness to Star Wars in general, I think that I probably wouldn't be in the minority of like kind of, I don't know, third tier level fans. I don't know where you would place me really, but I do think Anakin is a lot more interesting in the Clone Wars and some of the more ancillary material. When he's not played by Hayden Christensen.
I was about to say, yes. What does that have in common?
Yeah.
Mr. Hans Christian Andersen.
I'm Hans Christian Andersen. I've many a tale to tell. Though I'm only a cobbler, I feel I tell them rather well. I'm Hans Christian Andersen. Andersen, that's me.
It would have been great. If you'd been half that animated, it would have been great. Like, I think you're saying, he got better as he got worse. Maybe it's like, he got closer to being Vader. You could see him turning into Vader. Vader is wearing a mask. You can't see any emotion on his face. You can't hear emotion in his voice. So yes, as he gets closer to Vader, it's more Hans Christian Andersen, because that's what he's like.
Wonderful, wonderful Copenhagen, jolly old girl.
I need to run to the bathroom.
I'll continue.
While I'm there, to talk as loudly as you can about Ewoks.
Okay.
Also very hated, and I will jump in with some Wilford Brimley when I get back. So Ewoks, please.
Wilford Brimley, I can't wait.
Great. I got a connection.
That's the yep. Mm-hmm.
Well, when
tell me about Ewoks, my dear.
When I saw that movie, I was of an age where I just thought they were the cutest things I've ever seen in my life. It didn't occur to me that these things with sticks and whatever weren't going to kill the other thing. This didn't occur to me because I was a young child watching these little teddy bear things kick ass, and they were cute and they were funny, but they were also like tough, and I thought it was fine. You look at it now and you go, yeah, it's unbelievable. There's stormtroopers can't shoot straight. I mean, there are a lot of unbelievable things in this.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I was a child when I saw Return of the Jedi for the first time. It never occurred to me that there was anything about the Ewoks that was worse than all the other creatures in these movies. I thought they were perfectly acceptable. And I don't know if it's just that that opinion formed and has lasted, but I don't feel that way when I see Return of the Jedi now. I mean, yeah, they're kind of cute, but a lot of the creatures in these movies are kind of cute. I never had a problem with the Ewoks, and I never understood why so many people did. But I know the adult response to them when Return of the Jedi came out was kind of give me a break, as in Spaceballs when Lone Star says, you know, when did we get to Disneyland? You know, but I didn't mind the Ewoks at all. I think now that in general, if the Star Wars movies were new now, I don't think I'd really be that interested in them. I mean, I'd be missing out, but I don't, you know, I'm not really that interested in new fantasy or science fiction movies, and I probably would have missed the whole thing if I had been an adult then. But being a child as I was, also I think, you know, your critical faculties are a little different when you're a child. For example, if Return of the Jedi were a new movie now, I think I might have another bigger criticism of the Endor sequence, which is that it's just the woods, you know. It's another one of these, like, it's a fantasy magical wonderland. No, it's the woods. I've been there. Tolkien, he didn't create a fantasy land. It's the woods. There's mountains, there's lakes. We got all that stuff. But in the Star Wars movies, it's sort of interesting that there's a desert planet and a underwater land, and there's a forest world, and you know, you would play with your action figures in the sandbox, and that was Tatooine, and then you'd climb a tree, and that was Endor.
So just to be super nerdy here, there's the chance we may see Ewoks in Episode 9.
Oh, that's interesting.
And the reason I say that is we see in the trailer, we see the wreckage of the Death Star, which I guess we have to assume could have landed on the moon of Endor.
Oh, yes.
But also, that's a little strange considering that both Death Stars, I remember when they blew up, disintegrated. So I don't know where this wreckage of the Death Star has come from. But I'd be interested to see some Ewoks in a new Star Wars thing.
Has it ever happened? Are there Ewoks hidden in the prequels anywhere or anything?
No, as far as I know, in the movies, they're only seen in Return of the Jedi and then, of course, the Ewok Adventures.
Of course.
Which, if you have not seen, they're an entirely different kind of awful from the holiday special.
I saw them when they were new, but I haven't seen them since then.
They are oddly, you know, like almost Beckett-like in their lack of events. Not too much happens in them.
I would love it. You know what? I'm going to watch it and love it. I'm going to want to write a paper about it.
Okay, well, you know, just imagine, you know, Beckett is writing for 4-year-olds.
That's why I will love it.
Ewoks. But Wilford Brimley is in the second one, Ewoks, The Battle for Endor.
Okay. Wait.
Wilford Brimley plays an angry hermit that has a high-speed, super little, fast, kind of chittering companion. There's also Sienna Phillips, who played the Reverend Mother in Dune and was in I, Claudius. She plays a witch that transforms into a raven. And Carol Strayton
Dietrich on Broadway.
Really?
Yes.
Interesting. She's phenomenal. I love her.
Amazing.
Both of them, really. It also stars Carol Strayton, a.k.a. the Giant, the fireman from Twin Peaks, and Mr. Holm from Star Trek The Next Generation. He plays a marauder bandit leader guy. It's so stupid. I love it.
Are those Ewok TV movies considered canon by Disney?
I don't think they are, although elements of them have been usurped for canon things. So Clone Wars takes a few of the creatures from there, and just as kind of a nod to it. There are a few references to those things here and there in canon stuff, but no one in their right mind should make this canon.
It's funny how nothing is beyond, you know, nothing is too obscure or too bad to be incorporated into the mythology. Like we were talking last night, the Star Wars Holiday Special, for all about it that is ridiculous and beside the point, it is actually the debut of Boba Fett. It is.
That's where Boba Fett originally came from.
Yeah.
It actually established quite a lot of Wookiee culture that ended up being in, you know, I mean, the reason that Kashyyyk looks the way it does in episode 3 is because of the holiday special. That kind of set the tone. Unfortunately, we didn't get B. Arthur singing in episode 3. Maybe the special edition, we will get a song, Art Carney will show up or something. And I just want to, but while we're on the subject, I have the Return of the Jedi source book from the Star Wars role-playing game in the late 80s, mid to late 80s. I just wanted to read you a little thing from Wicket's description here. It says, finally, Wicket's people have recognized his many talents and achievements. He is a prime candidate for the position of tribal leader when Chief Chirpa retires. Several female Ewoks of the village have begun leaving small gifts, food, clothing, weaponry, and the like at his hut, a sure sign of romantic interest. A confirmed bachelor, Wicket is not sure he likes all the attention, but Ewok women are notoriously tenacious. Once they've set their sights on a male, his days of freedom are almost surely numbered. So it seems that Wicket was quite the unwitting and unwilling stud immediately following the events of the Battle of Endor.
It seems like Ewok women are little shrew-yentas. Seems like, what? I mean, they just go give him food, and they're like, oh, they like give him casseroles. I'm gonna take him a casserole.
That's how they do it in Minnesota too, and really, there are a lot of parallels between Ewok culture and Minnesotan culture when I think about it.
Yeah, let's take the bachelor a casserole.
So, all right, before we move on to a little game I've got here, do you have any other hated characters you feel we need to address that we may have missed or passed over?
Well, I'm surprised that you haven't talked about Hoojibs.
Oh, well, I mean, okay, yeah. Let's talk about Hoojibs real quick, because Hoojibs are my personal favorite hated character.
We watched a whole storybook about Hoojibs.
Was it Planet of the Hoojibs?
Yes, and I believe that was the debut of Hoojibs. See, nothing is too far afield to be incorporated into the mythology. You will know it is time to turn the page when you hear R2-D2 beep like this.
It's important to you, it's important to us. So we did spend a portion of our lives watching that story.
I appreciate that, and you're welcome. So for those that don't know, let me just give you a little visual cue here of Hoojibs. So these are Hoojibs. They're behind Mr. Skywalker. They are little telepathic bunnies with vague British accents.
They eat energy or something?
Yeah, they can drain energy with their little antennas, and they can sometimes zap. And they eat it. Keep in mind that in terms of like people being into Star Wars, after Return of the Jedi came out, there was very little material, especially narrative material, available at all. There were a handful of novels in the 70s. Not much came out until the early 90s. So for a long time, there was really just these Marvel comic books. That was the only Star Wars story you could really read. And then all of a sudden, there are these little pink and blue telepathic bunnies, and some fanboys were incensed.
As I said, I never got very deeply into any of the ancillary materials, and didn't read even the Timothy Zahn novels in the 90s. But during that dry spell you're referring to, I did have some Star Wars comic books, and I still have the first several issues, which serialized the first movie, which are interesting in several regards. But I also, when I was 9 years old in 1986, I just noticed this one day at the comic book store and bought it, and I still have it because it was the last issue.
Yes.
This was the last Star Wars ever. Yeah, there are Hoojibs, even on the cover.
And Nagai and Zeltrons, too. More hated comic characters, yeah.
So I did know about Hoojibs, and here are a few Hoojibs at the bottom of this cover. Yeah, I mean, to me, these comic books really were, you're right, it was all there was. And I think that's why so many of us preferred to just use our action figures and make up our own continuing stories. I also want to show you the first panel, the splash panel at the beginning of this issue. This is
Yeah, that's
I mean, this is
Skywalker.
what happened. That's Luke Skywalker. This is no more Star Wars than it's not even like fan fiction. It's indifferent. It's an indifferent spin-off.
It's I mean, I think the original, like, early, right after the
Yes.
A New Hope came out, then you had this really kind of, we have no idea what Star Wars could possibly be attempt at doing some kind of continuation with, you know, Han Solo with this ragtag group of completely inanely stupid characters. there's the carnivorous rabbit, the Lepus carnivorous, named Jackson, and then
Jackson with X's, right? Jaxxon. Yeah.
And Don Juan Quixote, he thinks he's a Jedi Knight, but he's not. There's unfortunately no, you know.
Wow, is that number
or whatever? And then there's Ameza, and she's, I guess, basically a gunslinger, stripper, and possibly drag queen. And then you've got this spiny guy, Haji or something like that is his name, and he Hedgie, I think. He's a porcupine that shoots quills.
Is that number 7, Marc-Anthony?
This is number 8.
Number 8.
I do have number 7 handy as well. But these were just beautifully bad, schlocky Star Wars stories that in no way were able to predict what would come later. There is a really weird. They do have Jabba the Hutt in an early one.
Yes, that's one of the things.
And he looks, you know, kind of like something you might use to get into the, like, crannies of certain weirdly shaped cups when you're washing dishes. That's what this Jabba looks like.
Yeah, because they had to. That scene was in the screenplay that they were working from.
Right. So the comic guys had to draw it.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And in general, the here, by the way, if anyone watching at home wants to see, this is
there he is.
The way Jabba the Hutt was depicted in this book.
And I mean, if you leave milk in a glass, you've got to use him.
He looks like Sebulba.
What's that?
He looks like Sebulba.
A little bit, a little more humanoid Sebulba.
But he's got like those things too, right?
A part of what's so interesting about the early Marvel Star Wars comics is that they are so clearly a product of the time before Star Wars was really a thing.
Yes, before Star Wars left its footprint on, you know, like 90% of media. This is kind of, you know, where the mentality of the comics reading population was. And it's strange to read.
The adapters took certain liberties that you wouldn't take with Star Wars now. And
oh, no.
Changing some lines around or filling in details that don't quite work with what we later come to know. It's very interesting.
It's true.
Before we move on to your fun and games, Marc-Anthony, a little off the subject, and I'll make this an online challenge as well.
Okay.
I'm very tough on Mr. Christensen.
Yes.
And I think it's well deserved. But I challenge anyone. Make me watch something. Tell me what to watch to change my mind. That he is not like this in every single thing he does. And it's not the writing and it's not the directing. It's this kid who cannot act. That's what
I think he's good in Higher Ground, but I have not seen it, and I kind of doubt that it's a movie I would want to see anyway.
Higher Ground.
Have you ever seen Factory Girl, in which he essentially plays Bob Dylan?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, I mean, I think that movie in general is a kind of shoddy exercise, and nothing about it is that good. But his performance in that movie, it doesn't have the same problems that his Star Wars performances have. I don't know. I don't think any of the.
I think it was the same.
I kind of agree, as Jason McMahon has said in our chat for this episode just a moment ago. I can't quite bring myself to blame any of the actors for the problems in these movies.
That's why I'm bringing this up, because you guys tend to agree on this, and I just really, really, really think it's the actor's problem here. I don't think it's a good character, and I don't think anybody could have done a great thing with it, but I think this guy was just... God, first they got Jake Lloyd, and then they got him, and like how it's just
But now someone could make an edit with the green milk pig in his place for every movie.
That would be a deep fake.
Instead of Hayden Christensen, you would just have this lactating
They have
creature.
They have a copy and paste or an edit and paste for that. So like every time you see him, it just clicks through and
Right.
yeah.
Now, I can't deny that it is certainly true that another actor might have had the wherewithal to invest some of that dialogue and scene work with more. I mean, there are examples in the Star Wars movies of great performers making a lot with a little. And he doesn't really, Hayden Christensen didn't quite do that. I know that before episode 2 was made, there was a lot of speculation that Leonardo DiCaprio was going to play Anakin. And a lot of people, I seem to remember, at least among the people I was talking to at the time, a general sense of terror and really not wanting DiCaprio in that role. But
I bet they've taken that back.
In retrospect, yeah, it might have been interesting to see what that kind of an actor might have done.
Especially if he would have just like reprised his role basically as Gilbert Grape's brother.
Or as Jack.
Yes. Okay, so I'm going to first of all, I'm going to just read you some. In terms of like, you know, hating Star Wars things, there are a lot of people seem to really hate some of the names, and I mean, some of the names are priceless. So I'm just going to read you a few Star Wars names. Some, you know, you may know, and some that are a little more obscure. I just want to get your reaction in terms of how stupid, or entertaining, or clever do you think this this name is. So the first one that I found that I had never heard of, this is the first time I've heard of this character, is Therm Scissor Punch.
Love it.
You like it? Pro Therm?
Therm?
Therm. Therm. Therm Scissor Punch.
Oh my God. Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
If I'm ever a wrestler.
That's a name you'd self-apply?
Yes.
Therm Scissor Punch.
Therm
I'm on
Scissor
board too.
Okay, Pro Therm. All right.
Who is Therm?
Therm Scissor Punch was the kind of lobster-looking guy in Solo.
Oh yeah, okay.
Not in Han Solo, in the movie Solo.
Yeah.
Okay, moving
Oh,
on.
you mean the parasite in Han Solo's
They
intestine?
took that scene out. It was a little graphic. The kids just couldn't.
Well, it was so big.
It was quite enormous. Poor Han. Okay, moving on. Greedo.
What?
Greedo. How do you feel about that as a name?
I feel like it's so normal to me.
Yeah, we've lived with that one for so long.
Yes.
I feel like, you know, I know somebody who has a dog named Greedo, probably, or a cat, or, you know.
I would imagine there are quite a lot of dogs and cats named Greedo, come to think of it. I wonder if someone does a census of pet names to find out, you know, like, how many of this name are out there this year. I want to know how many Greedos there are. And for that matter, are there any Therm Scissor Punches?
So we need to start a pet census? That's
Yes, a pet census, just for names and breeds or, you know, like descriptions, whatever. We can see if there are any lines crossing them. All right, how about the lead performer of the modal nodes from the Cantina, Figrin Dan.
Say it again.
Figrin Dan.
Figrin Dan?
Dan.
Figrin
like, you know,
Dan.
Yeah.
How do you spell figrin?
Figrin.
Figrin.
Apostrophe A-N.
Oh, Figrin Dan.
I may be saying it wrong. Figrin Dan.
I don't like that, really.
Yeah.
I don't like it. I think that guy's
It's something
slimy.
that makes me feel like I need to wash my hands. I
wouldn't trust him.
It's an uncomfortable name. Elon Sleazebagano.
Who?
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Bagano.
Sleazebagano.
Yeah.
Yo, does he talk like this?
He kind of does. It's not far off. He's the, you want to buy some death sticks?
Yeah.
Oh.
That's Elon Sleazebagano.
He does that thing.
It's one of those, I mean, it's a little bit like Greedo, but more so. Sleazebag with more syllables added to it.
Yes. Now, many people, as I was researching this, were quick to point out that that's not his actual name. That's what he's known by. His name is, you know, this slightly more alien-sounding thing that almost sounds like that.
I got no problem with. I love this part of Star Wars in general. The language of it, the funny names, the creatures. I find all of this pretty delightful.
Cornballness. Like it wallows around in that, you know, Jack Porkins, there's an early one.
Yeah, who is that? I've heard that.
Porkins is one of the pilots in the first Battle of the Death Star.
Right.
I love that. Wait, how soon does he die?
He's like maybe the first or he's one of the early pilots to die.
I was gonna say sounds like he dies early. That's his last name.
Right.
Porkins?
Baron Nutlewisky Papanoida.
Ah, yes. That is a character, I believe, played by George Lucas in episode 3.
It is. Yeah.
He's a playwright or something like that.
No, he's a baron, but he's really into the theater. I don't remember. He does have a couple of appearances in Clone Wars. I don't know if he's voiced by Lucas or not, but
Papanoida.
I want that to be my dog's name. Say the whole thing again.
Baron Nutlewisky Papanoida.
Oh my God, yes. If next pet I get, that's it. A fish, anything.
That's a great name for a fish. By the way, when I was reading about that, I learned, and maybe you already knew this, but the play, the ballet that Anakin and Darth Sidious are watching in Revenge of the Sith, it's a Mon Calamari ballet. It's called Squid Lake.
Yes.
Biggs Darklighter.
This is a visual of George Lucas as Baron Papanoida. Now, sometimes I think it's a delightful name and a delightful cameo, but sometimes Star Wars names seem to just be nonsense syllables, and sometimes it feels like you can pick them apart for onomatopoetic significance. And Baron Papanoida, Papa, because George Lucas is the father of this whole world, and Noida. I mean, he has this kind of adenoidal way of speaking, George Lucas. Papanoida is a great, slightly self-mocking thing for him to name himself, and I'm proud of him.
I'm with you. I mean,
he's watching this right now, and he's saying he had no idea that there was a connection to adenoids, and he's really upset, and he's going to go back and redo the whole thing.
He's at home going, do I really have an adenoidal voice? I don't think that's true. Like make me a Norman Mailer hut.
One of the hippie ladies on the street here is going to recommend as a salve. Just put some Papanoia on that. So we already talked about Count Dooku. That's a pretty goofy name that I happen to love, especially when Yoda says it. I love hearing Yoda, Dooku.
Yes, turn to the dark side, Dooku has.
Dooku.
Ewan McGregor does his best with it. I'll never join you, Dooku. It's almost like he's saying, doo-doo. I'll never join you, you doo-doo head.
Here's another of my favorite names is... That is spelled capital U-R, lowercase o, capital R, lowercase U, R, R.
The second script supervisor on episode 2.
It's one of the Tusken Raiders.
I was wondering if they have names and identities.
Are those things part of their faces, or are they masks?
I think they're masks. I'm sure at some point I've seen a picture of what Tusken Raiders look like under there, whether or not that's canon or not. I'm sure I have, but I don't remember what it is.
That's a great question. That's an interesting thing to think about, Albert, because it's like we expect that they would be gruesome in some way, but what if they're not? What if they just
what if they're really pretty?
Or just specific? What if they all look like John Houseman under there?
Every single one of them is Catherine Zeta-Jones.
They're all Dave Matthews butt mounts.
I also always thought Wedge Antilles, like when I first heard that as a kid, to me it just kind of sounded like a specialty salad.
I'll
take the Wedge Antilles with my filet mignon.
You and I are both rednecks, and you can tell that by the fact that when you hear wedge, you think salad.
Mm-hmm. I know.
Yeah.
I know.
I think of it.
We're not going to really make a salad out of it. We're just going to chop it.
And then we'll
call it a goddamn salad.
Ranch dressing on it and call it a damn salad.
You do the work.
A radish if you're lucky.
There's also Yoda's companion, Yaddle.
Yes, a female Yoda.
A female, I forget what species Yoda is, but Yaddle is also that.
Is she on the Jedi Council, but we only rarely get a glimpse of her? Is that
Yes.
right? Yeah. Yeah, she barely registers. I don't think she has a single line of dialogue or anything.
I love the Emperor's. You know, in Return of the Jedi, the Emperor has those like dignitary guys in gowns, not the guards, but they're the purple gown guys.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is named Sim Alu.
That sounds like it's Indian food.
Indian. I was just thinking
exactly.
that. Yeah,
That's
Indian.
the style of samosa. You can get the Sim Alu samosa, or you can get the paneer samosa, but you're gonna get.
Yeah.
Okay. Get this. In the an original or early draft, and not the original, but an early draft of Star Wars, Palpatine's name was Kos da Shit. Kosdahit.
Close to shit.
Kos da Shit. He causes the shit. It's not, it is at least apt.
Isn't it true that canonically Palpatine's first name is actually Sheev?
No, it's Frank. His name is Frank.
Frank Palpatine? Yeah, Frank Palpatine.
In episode 1 where he says, I must be Frank, Your Majesty.
He was a retired delivery guy.
Yeah.
Right, but no, his name is Sheev, which doesn't, I guess that's a Nabooian name. Like, oh, little Sheev looks great in his crib.
Short for Sheevan.
In his class pictures.
Sheev.
Oh, you're just going to take over the galaxy someday.
I just know he is. I just know it. Those cheeks.
Also on the super dumb list, so you mentioned the Timothy Zahn books earlier, Noah, and in a lot of ways, those were really just delightful pulp sci-fi that came out in the early 90s, and for those of us that were big Star Wars fans, we loved them, but one of the dumbest things about them, and there were many fun things in them, Timothy Zahn did a great job. He's from this town, so I really, it's kind of a source of local pride. But one of his not that great ideas was that if someone is cloned, it seems that their name is the name of the original host with an extra U added in. So at some point, Luke was cloned, and then he had to fight Luke Skywalker.
At least it wasn't Luku.
No, it wasn't Luku.
Never join you, Luku.
Say it again. Say it again.
I'll never join you, Luku.
Kit Fisto. There's another of my favorite names. Yeah, I really, we did have to give him a nod to the BDSM community in Star Wars at some point. Was
there a Fisto in Solo?
Yes. There was, by the way, do you remember the Masters of the Universe character, Fisto?
No.
Well, Google him real quick, because he was part of many young gay boys' sexual awakening, and his name was Fisto. I mean, he's a big leather daddy with a giant, armored fist. And his name is Fisto.
Yeah. Wow.
So there's that, people.
And so maybe our next podcast video has to be about that.
Yeah, sure. Let's. But quickly, can we talk about Soon Bates? I only discovered this character looking for these funny names.
Yeah.
Master Bates.
And the comic potential is clearly inherent. We've anticipated your coming, Master Bates. That was a square. Thank you.
Of course it did.
General Grievous is a name that a lot of people have not liked.
Oh, I think it's a great name. Grievous. I think it's wonderful. Also, I'm in love with General Grievous. I love him. I'm in love with him. I am.
Now I'm just going to try to pressure you to watch the Clone Wars. There's some great Grievous in Clone Wars. I know. No, you don't have to.
No, but I love that guy. I do love that guy. And
She really does. Episode 3, she always loves the Grievous.
I stop whatever I'm doing to watch the Grievous. And he's very, he's got the soul, the dark, tender heart of compassion that we all have. You just have to
That
touch.
Obi-Wan takes out. Yeah.
It's a very Buddhist moment when Obi-Wan hits his heart.
I like the name. It's a little on the nose, sure, but a lot of these names are, and I agree that he's an interesting character. And he's one thing that's really nice and well thought out, I think, in the prequels is that we get all of these variations on the idea of man/machine that's twisted and evil before we get to Darth Vader, and Grievous is kind of an evolutionary step on the way to Vader, isn't he?
Yeah. I think there was a lot of speculation early on that Vader was going to kind of assemble his suit as he, went along, and that Grievous would be part of this. But that clearly didn't happen. Okay, just a couple more here. Yariel Poof is another favorite of mine. He's that Jedi in the council chamber that has the big, wavering head with the long neck. He kind of looks like he's from Camino, but he's not. That's Yariel Poof. Okay, so I want to move on here to an actual game. I want you to tell me. I'm going to say a word, and each of you guess, is this a Star Wars character or a medication? Eloatzi.
How do you want us to? Do you want us to buzz in or just?
Just both of you take a guess.
Medication.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with Star Wars character.
It is a Star Wars character. He was an X-Wing starfighter pilot who worked for the Republic's Precision Air Team. Slow and Low. Medication or Star Wars character?
Star Wars character. And may I point out, just because they're Star Wars characters does not mean they're not medications and vice versa.
That's right. These things are not mutually exclusive. You can definitely be a Star Wars character and relieve tension.
Yes.
Slow and Low is indeed a Star Wars character.
We're getting a call from Abilify, Commander.
Slow and Low is the character.
He's the guy that reported Finn and Rose's crash site on the beach of Canto Bight. Lokara, Star Wars character or medication?
Medication.
Medication.
Yes, it is a topical ointment.
Just because you're a topical ointment does not mean you're not a Star Wars character, and vice versa.
All right, how about this? Star Wars character or skin condition? Pemphigus vulgaris.
Say it again.
Pemphigus vulgaris.
Star Wars character.
That is an autoimmune disorder that involves blistering and erosion of the skin and mucous membranes. Sorry.
Well, that's your opinion, Marc-Anthony.
It's my opinion. Star Wars character or skin condition? Corran Horn.
Corran Horn, Star Wars character.
Yes, a force-sensitive Corellian Rogue Squadron pilot. Okay, Star Wars character or skin condition? Bill Bringy.
If it's a skin condition, I want it. I'm going to say it's a Star Wars character.
I'm going to go with skin condition on this one.
It's actually neither. It's a star system in the inner rim region of the galaxy.
That was a trick.
Trick question.
It's a trap.
Okay, Salaporin, Star Wars character or medication?
Medication.
Medication.
It is a Wookiee seen in the Kashyyyk battle in Revenge of the Sith.
Wow. This is good. This is a very challenging game.
What are the side effects?
This is harder than you would think, right? Okay, Tora Doza, Star Wars character or Asian sweet?
Asian sweet.
Yeah.
Nope, she's the pilot of the Blue Ace Racer on the Colossus on Castilian in Star Wars Resistance.
Is she a sweet Asian Star Wars character?
She's not sweet. Which, most Asian sweets are not as sweet as American sweets. So.
No, it's true. No, I had that experience at Dim Sum.
It's true, yeah.
Oh, not with a sweet.
That ahead of time.
That was a chick. I think that was a poultry problem.
Apam Balik, Star Wars character or Asian sweet?
Say it again.
Apam Balik.
Star Wars character.
It is a Malaysian peanut cake.
Sounds good.
Just striking out.
Okay, Amber Griss, Star Wars character or fixative?
Fixative.
Star Wars character.
It is a fixative. It's a solid, waxy, flammable substance of a dull gray or blackish color produced in the digestive system of sperm whales.
See, I know my sperm whale gel.
Storax,
I know
Star Wars character or fixative?
Storax?
Character.
Fixative.
It is a natural resin located, isolated from the wounded bark of liquid amber orientalis. Nimtar, Star Wars character or fixative?
Fixative.
Character.
He's a Star Wars character. He was a member of the Republic's Galactic Senate.
Doesn't mean he's not a fixative.
Karashki, Star Wars character or Asian Sweet?
Asian Sweet.
It is a female Wookiee elder who hired Han Solo to find the long man, basically Kashyyyk's Slender Man. Okay, Arielid, Star Wars character or skin condition? Sorry, I pronounced that wrong. Aridild.
I have
Star Wars character.
It stands for acrorenal endothermal diplasmia lyotropic diabetes.
Wow.
Is that a Star Wars character?
Yes, it is. That's the one Wilford Brimley played in the Ewok Adventure.
So it's diabetes.
Yes. Cassilla, Star Wars character or skin condition?
Star Wars character.
It is the home planet of Grand Admiral Thrawn. Effexor, Star Wars character or medication?
Medication.
Medication.
Yes, it is an antidepressant.
I shouldn't have answered that.
Vizam, Star Wars character or or medication? Not
Vizam
necessarily antidepressant.
Who? What?
Vizam.
Vizam with a V?
Vizam. But I'm not going to spell all of these, you know.
Yeah.
That'll give it away.
It would be easier if we could see them on paper.
Star Wars
yeah.
character.
Skin condition.
It is a Star Wars character. He's one of Jabba the Hutt's lackeys. Okay, just a couple more here. Ko Hakuto, Star Wars character or Asian Sweet?
Star Wars character.
Asian Sweet.
It is an Asian sweet. It is a sweet made from sugar and agar-agar to resemble ice.
Which is a Star Wars character.
Star Wars character or fixative? Mordant.
Fixative.
Fixative.
It is a substance used to set, i.e. bind dyes and fabrics. Yes.
That was terrific.
Star Wars names, like the sheer variety of Star Wars names means that things like that are a lot more possible than you'd think.
Yeah, that was fun and challenging.
Indeed.
Educational.
I hope you folks were playing at home along with us.
And, send us your suggestions and questions like that. We'd love to try to guess.
Yeah, if you just write us and be like, I'm confused. I can't figure out if this thing in a tube next to my bed is an ointment or a Star Wars character.
And this is important information.
And we'll be like, hold on. Let's look it up on Wikipedia.
Can I use a sarlacc to decorate my house?
No, but you shouldn't use an ointment to do it either.
You shouldn't.
Right, well,
all right, so let's circle back around, though, because we skipped the big hate character.
Mm-hmm.
The most, I think, easily the most hated character in Star Wars.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anyone that would tell you otherwise. And that would be my little buddy. Misa's so happy to be seeing you. Jar Jar.
Oh, hello, Jar Jar.
So
that would be the bell jar.
So yeah, everybody kind of hated this guy a lot.
A lot.
From the get-go, from the second it started.
I mean, I think for a lot of people before it started, I think that just based on the couple seconds of film they'd seen of him before they saw the movie, they were starting to hate Jar Jar. And I think that my baseline response is, regardless of how much you may hate him, and people can have lots of legitimate reasons to hate him, he's barely in the movies. He's not in there that much.
Now, Marc-Anthony, you told us about this theory, and I stumbled upon it again today, and you know more about it, and we're not going to get into the whole thing, but the fan theory that Jar Jar is actually a Sith.
The Sith Lord?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And when you were telling me about it, I thought, what? He's like drinking some kind of tea, and I'm just not even going to listen to this. And now I've read it, and it's an interesting theory.
So, but here's my response to that. To your response to that. This kind of like, I think this is one of the joys of Star Wars is that you can take any ludicrous thing that you just make up, you go excavating in your ass and you find. And there's a way you can somehow explain how that is airtight and must be the case. Like it really is almost biblical in the sense that you just pick and choose a few things and you really can make a strong case for almost anything.
Well, especially when you say, as this fan does, this was supposed to be this way, but there was such a bad reception to Jar Jar that he pulled back and he didn't continue the storyline. And that's why he inserted Count Dooku instead, who doesn't seem to make any sense. I don't think that's true, but it's an interesting thing to think about, Albert.
But now let's quickly ask ourselves. Let's say that was the case. Let's say that initially Jar Jar was planned to be, we'll make him seem like this bumbling fool, and then it turns out he's actually, controlling these. Let's say had Lucas just gone ahead with that anyway, said no, they hate Jar Jar. Well, fuck them. They're still going to get, Lord. I don't know what you would call what would Darth
Binks.
Darth Bink. Nobody has to choose. It has to be like the Jar Jar version.
He can't be a Sith and talk like that, right?
No, he would just lower his voice a bit. Misa, Misa being Darth Binks. Yusa being the big doo-doo now. Misa, tighten with the dark side.
Yeah.
But I mean, let's say that had that actually played out that way somehow, and we got Darth Ridiculous, Darth Ludicrous. Do you think there's a way that somehow that would have been much better than what we actually got?
No.
If somehow, no.
No.
I mean, in a way, we did, Jar Jar is not an evil character, but as we discussed in our episode 2 conversation, he does cast the decisive vote that kind of screws the galaxy. He does it unwittingly. He thinks he's doing the right thing. But it's not so far removed from what actually happens in the movie there is a take on it that says Jar Jar is, in a sense, on the wrong side.
Yeah, I just would like to see that version. I want to see the reveal scene.
I want to see what
it's been Misa the whole time. I want to see that.
Is it like a Scooby-Doo?
So bad. Yes, it's actually Farmer Dan from the
Dan.
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 But also, I love that, Jar Jar, regardless of how people, whether they hate him passionately or they don't care, which I think, as far as I'm concerned, apathy is probably the best response to Jar Jar.
Yeah.
Or the most, I just feel I can see if you don't like it, but I can't imagine getting that upset about it.
That character succeeds as digital animation, but
Sure.
fails as comic relief, and he's defended as well. He's the comic relief character, to which I say, well, then he's
not very funny. Yeah.
But you're so right about the fact that he barely, in episode 1, which is by far his biggest role, he's, it's maybe 10 minutes altogether. It's very
that,
low.
but yeah, it's not that much. He's not in there that much. I think he just really pushes the buttons of some people that just can't stand the silly. But he really makes the silly too much. And I totally understand that, but I'm into Star Wars for the silly in a lot of ways, and especially for the inept. That's where it really gets my heart. So when Star Wars just sucks on a big level, that's kind of when I'm the happiest.
Do you think there's any chance, do either of you think there's any chance of any Jar Jar or Gungan reference in episode 9. There's been a lot of talk about how the prequels are going to, this episode is going to tie the whole thing together, and the prequels will be acknowledged more in episode 9 than they were in 7
Well, if they
8.
want to stay within established, I guess, theoretical canon, you could throw in a Jar Jar in a way that would be probably inoffensive to most people, which is apparently, according to, I forget where I read this, but some of the material, he ended his life, or the last time he was heard of, he was a court jester in not a court jester, but he was doing like street magic or joking in Coruscant on the streets. So you could just have Jar Jar, like, be this beggar doing a kind of faulty routine on the streets of Coruscant as a little cameo. And if it was done just right, it might be really delightful for everybody. Not just me. I would love to see Jar Jar make out with an Ewok somehow,
How old, what is the lifespan of a Gungan? Wouldn't Jar Jar have to be pretty old by episode 9?
I don't know, but we have no, as far as, I'm sure that somewhere in the, comic books or data banks that you can find out how long Gungans live, but I could see them living longer than your average human.
I don't particularly need to see Jar Jar or a Gungan in episode 9, but I do like, one of the things that I like about the new generation of Star Wars movies is they don't pretend the prequels never happened, Jimmy Smits turns up as Bail Organa in Rogue One, and there are other things too in episodes 7 and 8 that acknowledge the fact that there are 3 movies, which, whatever their flaws, are a big part of this whole thing.
Yeah, no, they really, and I think Last Jedi especially, it kind of has some loving nods towards the prequels that are, kind of trying to harvest from them things that can connect all of the series while, just genuinely giving kudos to the parts of the prequels that the creative team liked.
Mm-hmm.
No, I just want to clarify something that Noah said, that I think you were not saying that Jimmy Smits was one of the flaws.
No.
I
hope.
No, I was not.
You just said Jimmy Smits, whatever flaws those movies may have, and I just wanted to not incite our Jimmy Smits audience.
No, I voted for Matt Santos, and
ate with Jimmy Smits at Denny's.
I met Jimmy Smits at Denny's once in Florida. And I do no. I like the fact that Rogue One acknowledges the prequels by continuing, Jimmy Smits. And there's been talk about, I don't know if we're going to get a lot more standalone movies, because apparently they abandoned some plans after Solo disappointed at the box office or something. But when they were talking for a while, there was a lot of buzz about maybe Ewan McGregor doing an Obi-Wan movie. I'd be all in favor of that too.
Yeah, I think that's an area where I'm personally just a little angry, because I feel like that seemed like it was steamrolling ahead. We were going to have at least one movie where he reprised that role. And it kind of just needed the switch to be turned on, and it almost certainly would, but then the disappointing figures of Solo seemed to kind of put a hatchet into that plan. But he still says he would love to do it, from what I've heard.
I would love to see that. I'd love to see a really, especially with a really good screenplay. It could
right, and a really, a director that knows how to work specifically with him and with Star Wars. That would be fantastic. So
Danny Boyle.
I saw just recently Samuel L. Jackson took the trouble to go on the record as willing to return to Mace Windu.
Well, so yeah, let's talk. I feel like Mace Windu, as my inner 13-year-old just feels that Mace Windu can't be dead. In the same way that the Sarlacc couldn't possibly have swallowed Boba Fett and that's it. Mace Windu, he got his hand chopped off. Lots of people get their hands chopped off in Star Wars and get new ones.
It's like a rite of passage.
Yeah. That can't be the first time he's lost an appendage. He's Mace Windu.
And we've seen characters throw themselves out Coruscant windows and land safely in all kinds of places.
You just grab a passing flybot droid. We've seen this happen. You just get somewhere, tend your wounds, go and hide out until
This
you
can't
get
be
a
the person who's lost a hand, even. I mean,
yeah.
Come on.
If the machinery of Lucasfilm wanted to do a movie with Samuel L. Jackson as Mace Windu, I don't think they would let that stop them. The fact that he ostensibly died in episode 3.
Yes, yeah. But I mean, just as a stupid little fan, it's something I have a hard time accepting. And I'm like, I don't really believe that a Jedi Master would fall from that height and not be able to find a way to maintain his life.
I really like when you do that voice.
Okay.
I really do. That's good.
I think that's actually what Marc-Anthony's like as soon as he turns the camera off.
That's my actual, what that is. I have to work hard to not talk that way.
Good job today.
Yeah. So, okay, I feel like with each of these episodes, since we are kind of, basically setting our sights on Rise of Skywalker and what's going to happen in that, as we draw closer, we'll probably, hear various rumors or leaks or whatever. And let's just talk a bit about what we're expecting or what we'd like to see, since it's still a fair ways out before we get to see it. Let's kind of just go over, first of all, what do you hope does not happen or is not the case in this installment?
In Rise of Skywalker?
Yeah.
What do I hope
This is more of a personal thing, and it's less of a specific Star Wars thing. That's less of a specific, I don't want like this relationship to happen or blah, blah, blah. But I don't want more questions. I know they can't wrap everything up. I have to go in with no expectations so that I don't get my heart broken by another saga or series. But I just hope it's not a whole lot of like nod to very surface things and we just totally forget about other stuff and we walk out going, oh, that was great. And then we're like, wait a minute. For anything. Which it totally could. It could be flash and mirrors and we could love it and they could just keep throwing stuff at us. It's easy stuff. I really hope they get into some of the more difficult things and how the hell some of this happened and they don't just say, oh yes, remember we were talking about how Yoda was working on that thing to bring back to life? Well, it worked. Anyway.
I mean, I do have kind of similar fears. Like I think, we've discussed this quite a bit already, but I'm not the biggest J.J. Abrams fan. And I do feel like, I mean, to put it lightly, I've seen very little of his stuff that I liked at all. And I think one of the only reasons that I can enjoy The Force Awakens is that it is a Star Wars movie. I don't like Abrams. And I am worried that he will make this a very surface level, like I'm shoving Star Wars popcorn down your gob.
Yes, that's what I don't want.
Yeah. And you're going to jizz whale for the first few weeks. Noah, what are you afraid of?
I mean, other than a general, I'm having a hard time thinking of a specific answer to that question. But generally, I am afraid of it being, unsatisfying. It is. I mean, we have talked before about how other Star Wars movies, notably Episode 1, had this kind of impossibly tall order. And I can't help but wonder, although like many people, I have a long list of improvements I would make to Episode 1 or things I wish were different about it. I don't know that anything could have really dazzled, given the buildup and the expectations of finally seeing Episode 1. And this movie, in a way, has a similar burden because it has to close off this entire, very disparate and at this point sort of fragmented story. I had thought before that maybe it would solve that problem by not solving it and just saying this is another episode, and like all the other episodes, it'll introduce some new things and it'll play around with some old things and it'll continue and just the fact that it's the last episode in the Skywalker saga, we know it's not going to be the last Star Wars movie we ever see, and so the idea that it might end ambiguously seems quite possible. But in his statements to the press, Abrams, who I acknowledge your criticisms, I don't feel quite as down on him, but I really do understand the criticisms, and I but he's been saying a lot, you know, oh, well, we've been really looking at this as not just a sequel to episode 8, but a culmination of the whole story. This is the last of 9 movies. And so he is really putting that out there, saying, you know, this is going to sum up the whole thing, and it is going to address open loose ends from previous films. And that to me, that's exactly what I want. I hope that really is what it does.
You know what? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I've heard it from J.J. Abrams before. I don't think he's going to do it.
You don't think he's going to finish off the story, or you don't think he's going to?
I don't think he can, and I don't think he has any interest in doing that.
I see. I do agree with you about J.J. Abrams, but I try to remind myself that he's not the only person writing it. I assume, right? Who else is writing it? I haven't even looked at who is, you know. But
yeah, I did. I did know this at one point. Well, I mean, he wrote Force Awakens with Lawrence Kasdan. I mean, that was obviously a good choice. And I mean, when he made Star Trek, I remember thinking, you know, he's made a very credible space opera version of Star Trek, and he's done a good job directing a pretty good cast in those classic roles. But this Star Trek is missing all the social and political and philosophical underpinnings that made Star Trek interesting. In a way, he has made it more like Star Wars, but without the mythological grandeur that makes Star Wars what it is. I thought he did a beautiful job with The Force Awakens. I really did, and until then, I was very iffy on him. But I don't know. I really like The Force Awakens a lot. It is more of a thrill ride and it's a shallower movie than The Last Jedi for sure. But that made it, I thought, a pretty good kickoff for this new trilogy. And I don't know. I felt good enough about that, certainly, to feel hopeful about episode 9.
I struggle with Force Awakens a lot. I mean, there are things that I really do enjoy about it, but I think that the cast and the script are what keep me enjoying it a lot more than his direction, which just when it works, it's in kind of a way that's just still too pandering for me to really. It takes me out of the experience because it's look at your childhood. Here's the nostalgia.
I'm a sucker for that.
Pander too, and it just seems condescending and inept in a lot of ways. Especially that it seems so much like just a rehash of A New Hope that it's a bit embarrassing to me, and I'm just afraid that that's what we're going to get with this finale is something that is candy coated to seem like Star Wars but doesn't have the heart.
But don't you think that just by virtue of having to continue from episode 8, there is not an option to do a carbon copy of Return of the Jedi or something. Yeah. The story is in a place now where a lot of stuff has to be dealt with, and
that is true.
You know.
Yeah. No, and I'm trying to keep my judgment reserved until I sit down in the seat and watch it. So in terms of, let's get some stupid fan theories out there. The predominating one that I've been seeing, and I can't deny that when you look at some of the kind of canon material, like the comics and the books and things like that, they do seem to be planting some seeds and assuming that all of these people are reporting back to a central authority that has more information than the average person about what will be in episode 9. They seem to be planting some seeds about, Palpatine's return and how that was affected, to the effect of Darth Plagueis being involved.
Yeah.
I think we're going to have to go
the big one.
That's definitely Palpatine laughing at the end of that thing.
It is definitely Palpatine laughing. What fans seem to be saying, what I'm reading, is that Plagueis just inhabited Palpatine and took over. He was just a senator from Naboo that was under Plagueis's direction, and then Plagueis was grooming him to be his next body. That's how he conquered death, was by grooming younger bodies to be powerful enough.
Don't say it like that again.
I'm sorry. Yeah, that. Well, but I think that it might be pretty intentional, this idea that it actually is about that kind of predatory relationship.
That would be a way to work. I mean, that sounds promising.
So the idea is that he was taunting Luke. In Return of the Jedi, he really did want Luke to kill him because then his spirit could enter Luke. He was originally planning on taking over Vader, but he lost his limbs and became half robot, and he was like, all right, now I got to start over.
I don't know. Now it seems to be falling apart when you're talking more about it.
Well, it sounds ridiculous to me.
Well, I mean...
but I can see this being like a big fan theory that a lot of people are expecting, and by the time it comes out, want. And if it doesn't happen, they're going to be butthurt.
I mean, I think, I don't know what I think. I mean, yeah, there's got to be something about that. And if Palpatine's back, then it's got to be, and who is Snoke? Like, they've got to explain that.
That's one of the things I like about the possibility of Palpatine figuring back into the story. It's really doubling down on the Snoke was nothing idea. Snoke, that was really a misdirect. Snoke.
I think no matter what the case is, Snoke was being manipulated by Palpatine. Now,
but don't you think that's an example? I mean, it seems to me that when conceiving The Force Awakens, Abrams and Kasdan, I suppose, and maybe Kathleen Kennedy too, they decided, well, we're going to need an arch villain to be what Palpatine was in the old movies, so we'll create Snoke. And then in The Last Jedi, Rian Johnson makes the decision, like, no, we're going to dispose of Snoke unexpectedly and abruptly. And that's not actually going to be what this is all about. And now J.J. Abrams comes back to the office, and okay, his plan isn't going to... I mean, now, there has been some suggestion in the press that the 3 movies were planned out in advance to some extent. The arc of the story... The Last Jedi was not really written with a blank piece of paper, and so that would suggest that maybe Snoke was always supposed to be a red herring.
I mean, I do think that a lot of the broad strokes, at least, seem to have kind of been at least tacitly agreed upon from the start. And like, I think the understanding was initially that, and why they were, of course, aside from losing a wonderful global treasure in Carrie Fisher, I think one of the things they were upset about was that The Force Awakens was supposed to be Han's story, Last Jedi was Luke's story, and then this one was going to be Leia's story, and they couldn't really focus on her to the extent that they wanted to, and kind of had to shift gears in that direction. But I mean, to speak more to Palpatine, there was a leak that came out from apparently a reliable source. I don't really know how to vet Star Wars sources at this point, but other higher level nerds seem to know who they can trust a bit. And there were a lot of rumors of this new threat from the unknown regions was going to be a major part of Episode 9. So what I know about the unknown regions isn't really that much, but I mean, from Clone Wars and Rebels and a couple of other shows, we do know that that's where Grand Admiral Thrawn disappeared to shortly before the Civil War started, or around the time the Civil War started. And in the Timothy Zahn books, Thrawn was instrumental in finding the Emperor's cloning facilities after Return of the Jedi. So it seems like there's a good chance that Palpatine is trying to maintain immortality through cloning. That's a possibility. Also that he, after his death, his spirit went to these unknown regions where he built up the First Order.
Why couldn't Episode 9 have been called The Emperor's New Clones? By the way, the J.J. Abrams screenplay collaborator on Episode 9, his name is Chris Terrio. He's a screenwriter best known for writing the screenplay for Argo, an excellent film and a pretty good screenplay in my view. He also wrote the screenplay for Batman versus Superman: Dawn of Justice.
I have not seen.
Not
I have seen that, and that does not really give me a lot of hope, gotta say.
Argo's good, though. Do you like Argo?
I have not seen Argo, so I can't really
commentate. Good, but it's a totally different story than the real story.
But Batman versus Superman, while I would have to say is perhaps nowhere near as terrible as most people would tell you it is, it's at least watchable. It is kind of a trash heap.
Is that Hot Henry guy in it?
Hot Henry? Who's Hot Henry?
Henry Cavill, or whatever his name is.
Is that Batman's sidekick? I don't know who that.
I don't know. I don't know. He's
he
hot.
played
There were no
Superman
hot
in
Henrys
some.
that I saw, but
Superman.
maybe we have different, standards for how hot a Henry is. Is this a hot Henry or not hot Henry?
Well, what if I name some Henrys? Would you both be willing to rank them
Yeah,
on a
yeah.
scale of 1 to
There's a
10?
few Henrys, and we'll tell you on a scale of 1 to 10 how hot that Henry is.
All right, we'll start with Henry Kissinger.
I haven't heard anything since Marc-Anthony said a threat from the unknown regions.
Oh, you haven't heard anything?
Like, that just took me. I mean, I heard that, and that was, I'm a 10-year-old boy. I'm gone.
If you're having a threat from unknown regions.
In Catholic school, that was the name of our sex ed class.
Take Dan, or take finger Stan if you're having a threat from unknown regions.
Listen, just apply a thin layer of Baron Papanoida.
Well,
okay, so have we talked through all the hate? Do we have enough hate on our plates?
I feel absolutely purged of all my hate.
I mean, I think what we seem to have found is that we don't have that much Star Wars hate ourselves.
We're pretty cool and calm about this.
We're neutral at worst with a lot.
I'd like to explore my hate some more, but
well, what more hate do you want to explore?
I mean, I figure I can find like a personal trainer.
A hate trainer?
Hate trainer.
Well, I mean, if Yoda's to be believed, if you want more hate, you have to first fear. So you need to be more afraid and then more angry. I guess in that sequence, they need to, be afraid and then angry. Then you have to be careful because the next step is suffering.
Oh God!
So, if you're not prepared, I don't know if you want to go that far. If you just want to keep it at hate.
I didn't know if this was going to be an all-semester class. I just thought it was going to be like auditing a couple.
Do you not read the syllabus?
You know what?
People read the syllabus. Do you know how much it costs me to print that shit up and you don't even read it?
Someone was in academia for too long.
Yeah, sorry.
Here's a serious thought about hate, that in our childhood experience of Star Wars, particularly in Return of the Jedi, hate is so explicitly spoken about by Palpatine as the most powerful weapon that evil has. Palpatine is in that scene with Luke and Vader that dominates the last part of the movie. He says, "Your hate has made you powerful. Strike me down. Feel the hate flowing through you." And it made an impression on me as a child that hate was this toxic, dangerous thing, and that the heroic characters were striving not to not feel hate, but to not give into it. In other words, to manage their hate, which is something many Star Wars fans would do well to learn to do. And maybe that's why the moment in The Last Jedi when Rose Tico has her line about, not fighting what we hate, but saving what we love. Maybe one of the reasons that line hits me in the heart the way it does is because it's the first time in Star Wars that love as a philosophical concept, not love as a romantic interest.
I know, yeah.
That's the first time that love is presented as by name as the alternative to hate and as the thing that can fight hate and destroy hate.
And really is the only alternative that has been offered. If I can, I can't think of any. Let's say yes, don't give in to your hate. But how about some suggestions on how to do that?
There's a lot of talk about hope. Hope gets a lot of.
But that's not in direct opposition to hate, really. Is it? Is it ever mentioned in direct opposition to hate?
Not really. Hope is it seems to be the ideal. That maybe I'm mostly saying this because of Rogue One and Leia's CGI.
The title of the first installment that we saw, that also mentions hope and
yes.
But I think that when I was thinking about the hatred that Star Wars fans have, or that people that don't like Star Wars have for Star Wars, because I think we do have to recognize that if you don't like Star Wars, especially lately, you've had to hear about it a lot, and that's obnoxious. If there's something you don't like and everyone is talking about it.
No one knows that feeling well.
What?
No one knows that feeling well.
I think everybody does, right?
Is this about sports ball? Is it?
Noah doesn't like anything that other people like.
Oh, it used to be a lot truer than it is. But yes, well, yes, like you, Marc-Anthony, I'm not particularly a sports fan. Yeah. And so, yes, there does come a time when you just think, if one more person mentions the Olympics, I'm going to scream. But, but now I've come to realize that we don't have to feel so strongly about these things. Our stuff will come around. It's fine. Yeah. Enjoy the Olympics.
It's true.
It's the Sondheim Fest.
But I feel like that partially, like, when we're looking at like all these hated characters, and there's a lot of them. There's a lot of characters that a lot of people have very strong negative feelings towards. And if they also have a lot of very strong positive feelings about Star Wars, and I think that having that many things to hate is kind of part of the efficacy of Star Wars. The fact that you can really get into it enough and have very strong feelings about things that you don't like, but you're still going to participate in it. It gives you something to chew on. And I think especially sci-fi fans and nerdier people, they kind of enjoy hating the things that they love. It's really about ripping it apart and finding the plot holes. And I remember reading once someone that wrote a lot of sci-fi television, and I don't remember who it was. I wish I could remember who this was, but they said they intentionally will write in a plot hole here and there just to give fans something to respond to make them feel like they're smart, that they have found something that the creators didn't or overlooked, and they're able to point it out. And this is part of the conversation you're having as someone that's writing science fiction, because your audience likes to figure things out. They like to win, and you have to lose in order for them to win. So I feel like the fact that there are so many hokey and ridiculous names and characters in Star Wars and things that are easily hateable, especially by that personality type that gets really obsessive about their media, that's one of the things that keeps Star Wars going in a way that other things might not be able to do as well.
I agree 100%. And Star Wars 2, especially at this point, is such a vast landscape. I mean, it's increasingly an epic. It's always been an epic, but I mean, it's hundreds of characters, and it's this multi-generational saga now that encompasses so much. It's almost more like a place, a country that we visit sometimes, that's inhabited by a country's worth of population. And sure, of course, there's always going to be a certain amount of it that if you're looking for problems to have, you're going to find them. It's also, at this point, it's the work of so many artists. I mean, we rightfully give George Lucas the major credit for creating it, which he did. But more and more all the time, Star Wars is the brainchild of hundreds of creative minds, and it's as varied as it's really its own genre in so many ways.
I mean, and it's fascinating in that way, because all of those artists, at least to a small extent, are really collaborating on something and reacting to what one or another are doing. I mean, if you got a gig writing a Star Wars novel, you're going to have to read at least 10 or 15 Star Wars novels to make sure that you don't upset the readers. You're going to need to reference things that other writers have come up with. And same thing with the visual artists and even musicians and composers that are following in John Williams' footsteps, because not every Star Wars thing is scored by John Williams these days. So you still need to nod to those scores and to the highs and lows of that kind of specific big emotion music, but still make it your own. And also whatever thing you're working on needs to kind of have its own flavor, because there's so many different flavors of Star Wars now outside of the films themselves that at least I assume try to keep a somewhat consistent style throughout.
Yeah, that's why I have high hopes for episode 9. I mean, it's easy to have high hopes, I suppose, because I was pretty pleased with episodes 7 and 8. So if episode 9 turns out to be very disappointing, it'll be disappointing even in the context of this trilogy. But I feel like the Star Wars flame is being tended in a pretty conscientious way, and and it'll also, I think, be nice to have like bookends on this specific Star Wars story.
Well, and I also think with the whole series, out there and available, within a couple of years, people will be able to have all episodes, on whatever format they want, whether they want a digital copy or their DVDs, and you can watch the whole thing in sequence right after one another without having all of those years of, kind of guessing at what's going to happen next. I think new generations can just blow through this series really quickly and maybe appreciate it more for what it is and less for what they specifically wanted it to be.
Yeah. Well, I think it's getting to be time to turn the air conditioning back on around here.
It is. Yes. Well, it's been wonderful hanging out with you as always. And
wonderful as
we'll see
always.
everyone next week for Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah, we're weekly this period because we missed an episode last week. So we'll be back
double
for
the faces this time.
Yeah, lots of faces. And we'll be back with our discussion of episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, 1 week from today. That'll be June 23rd at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Yes.
I might mention that facesofstone.space is a great resource for anyone looking for our entire episode guide and schedule to see what hold on, I'm having a technical problem. All right, yeah, check our website for all that stuff. You can find us on Twitter as M_A_Macon, president of Sisk, and Noah Diamond.
Say hello to us.
Say hello.
We're friendly.
And we'll see you next time on
Faces
of Stone.